She steals bread every week. She has never been caught. Tonight, she will be. A king's hand closes around her wrist in the dark. She knows the punishment for theft from the royal stores. She has known it since she was 8 years old and watched a man swing from a rope for less than she carries tonight. She does not beg. She has never begged, not once, not for herself. But there are children in the Undercity who have not eaten since Sunday. And the man holding her wrist has not yet looked at her face. When he does, what will he see? A thief or something he recognizes. The granary at midnight smells of dust and grain, and the particular cold that settles into stone long after the sun has gone. Senna knows this smell the way she knows the back of her own hand. She has learned its silences. She has learned which floorboard in the eastern storeroom groans like an old man's knees, and which one holds its tongue. She has learned that the third Tuesday of every month, the night guard named Beck takes his rounds slow and loud on purpose, coughing twice before he turns the corner, because 4 years ago she fed his sister's children when his sister could not, and Beck has never said a word about it, not once, and Senna has never thanked him, because to thank him would be to admit that she needs him, and to need anyone is a softness she cannot afford. Tonight the floorboard does not groan. Tonight Beck does not cough. She does not notice this at first. She is too busy with her hands. The basket she carries is unremarkable, woven reeds, a chip in the rim, the kind of basket 100 Undercity women might carry to market. Except that this basket has a second bottom built into it. A thin panel of wood notched so carefully into the weave that even a woman searching for it with her fingers might miss the seam. Senna built it herself 4 years ago, with a knife she stole from a butcher who never noticed it was gone, and a patience she did not know she had until hunger taught it to her. Above the false bottom, a handful of withered apples, the kind no steward would miss, scattered there to look like the whole of her business. Below the false bottom, 6 loaves of black bread, still warm from the ovens, stolen in the last 20 minutes from a storeroom 3 corridors back where the royal kitchens keep, more bread baked than the castle could eat in a week. Because waste, up here, is simply how plenty announces itself. She has done this every week for 4 years. She tells herself every single time that this will be the week she is caught. She has needed, for 4 years, to be wrong. Tonight, crouched in the dark with the last loaf settling into its hidden place, she hears nothing. No cough, no groan, no warning of any kind, and a hand the size of a dinner plate closes around her wrist, like a manacle that has been waiting its whole life for her arm. She does not scream. She has trained the scream out of herself the way she has trained out hope, out softness, out anything that might be used against her. What she does is go very still, the way a hare goes still beneath a hawk's shadow, every part of her narrowing down to the single fact of the hand and what it intends to do with her. 6 loaves, says a voice above her, low, almost thoughtful, as though he is doing arithmetic in his head and not yet deciding what to do with the answer. That's a great deal of bread for one woman. She knows, before she lifts her face, exactly whose voice this is. Every soul in the kingdom knows that voice. They have heard it from balconies and battlements, heard it pronounce judgments and accept surrenders, heard it, twice in her lifetime, declare war and once declare peace. She has never stood close enough to hear it without 100 bodies between them. She has never imagined she would hear it directed at her, low and near, as though they are the only 2 people left in the world. She lifts her face anyway. There is no version of this where looking away saves her. Alpha King Osric is younger than the stories make him, 33, though the weight he carries in his shoulders suggests a man who has buried more of his own people than a man his age should have had to bury. He is not what she expected of a king up close. His knuckles are scarred, not soft. His jaw carries 3 days of stubble, not the clean-shaven vanity of the high-born men she's glimpsed from market stalls. And his eyes, gold-flecked amber, the eyes of his wolf bleeding through even in this human shape, the way a shifter's eyes do when something has caught their attention hard enough to wake the beast beneath the skin. Those eyes are fixed not on her face, not yet, but on the basket in her arms. "I asked you a question," he says. "You didn't," she says. Her voice comes out steadier than she feels, the only kind of defiance she has left to offer. "You made an observation about bread." Something moves at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. The ghost of the idea of one. "6 loaves," he says again. "From the royal stores, at midnight, hidden beneath a basket of apples no one would bother stealing." His grip on her wrist has not loosened, but it has not tightened either. He is simply holding her. The way a man holds a door, he has not yet decided whether to open or close. "You built that basket yourself." It is not a question. She answers it anyway, because lying to a king with his hand on her wrist seems like a fool's economy. "I did. How long?" 4 years. The amber in his eyes sharpens, not with anger, she realizes. Though she has braced for anger, the way she braces is for all things, automatically. A held breath, she does not remember choosing to hold. It is something closer to recognition. The look of a man doing sums that come out wrong, over and over, and refusing to stop checking his work. 4 years, he repeats, and no one has caught you. "You have. I have," he agrees, and for one suspended moment, in the grain dust, dark with her wrist locked in his hand and 6 stolen loaves warm against her ribs, Senna does the thing she has trained herself never to do. She hopes. Not for mercy. She does not yet believe in mercy. Has never once seen it offered to someone like her without a blade hidden in its palm. But she hopes, treacherously, helplessly, that whatever is about to happen will happen quickly, because she has always thought she would rather die fast than be made to watch herself be afraid. The Alpha King releases her wrist. She does not run. She has learned that running only confirms a man's right to chase. "Walk," he says. It is not the dungeon, the direction he points her. It is down, further down than the granary, further down than the kitchens, down past the servants' stair, and into the warren of close stone corridors, where the undercity breathes its damp breath, up through the foundations of the castle that was built 400 years ago, directly on top of it, the way the rich have always built, directly on top of the poor, without once feeling the floor shift beneath their feet. She walks ahead of him because he tells her to, and because there is, suddenly, nowhere else for either of them to be. She thinks, the whole way down, about the noose she has been braced for since she was 8 years old. She thinks it might be easier, in its way, than whatever this is. A king walking 3 steps behind her through the dark, saying nothing, his silence somehow louder than any sentence he might have pronounced. She does not know yet that he is counting. He has been counting since the granary, not loaves, though he noted that number 2, and filed it the way he files all numbers, automatically, a habit older than his crown. He is counting her steps instead, the particular economy of them, the way she moves like someone who has spent a lifetime taking up as little space as possible, like a woman who learned early that to be noticed was to be in danger, and something in his chest that he has not let move in a very long while is beginning, despite every instinct toward control that has kept him alive and ruling for 15 years, to move. The warren, when they reach it, smells of cold stone and tallow smoke, and underneath both, the unmistakable sourness of too many bodies in too little space with too little to eat. Senna steps slow without her permission. Behind her, she hears the king's breath catch. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a small hitch, the kind a person makes when a smell reaches some part of them faster than thought can follow. She does not yet understand what that hitch means. She turns the last corner into the room where the children sleep. 11 of them tonight, ages from 3 to 12, curled together under blankets too thin for the season, because blankets like bread are something the city above has in excess, and the city below has in want. And there, awake despite the hour, sitting upright with her knees drawn to her chest and her eyes fixed on the doorway, the way a sentry's eyes fix on the horizon, is Willa. Willa is 9 years old. Willa has not, in the 2 years Senna has known her, ever once been surprised by anything, which is its own kind of tragedy. The tragedy of a child who learned too young that surprise is a luxury for people who expect good things. Willa's eyes go from Senna to the basket to the man standing in the doorway behind her. And something in the girl's small face goes very, very still. Senna, Willa says, careful, testing the word the way a person tests ice. Who is that? Senna does not turn around. She does not need to. She can feel him there the way you feel weather coming, a pressure change in the air before the storm breaks. That, she says, and her voice does something she has not allowed it to do in years. It shakes, just slightly, on the next 4 words, is the Alpha King. She waits for the room to scream, or weep, or do any of the things a room full of frightened children might reasonably do in the presence of the man whose word could end every life in it with a single sentence. What the room does instead is fall utterly silent. 11 children and 1 grown woman holding their breath together, waiting to learn what kind of king has followed a thief into the dark. Osric does not speak. He has stopped just inside the doorway, and Senna, finally turning to look at him, because the silence has stretched past what she can bear not knowing, sees something on his face that she has no name for, because she has never before in her life seen it directed at people who look like the people in this room. He is looking at the children the way a starving man looks at food he has been told. His whole life, he is not permitted to touch, his jaw is tight. His hands, when she looks down at them, are curled at his sides. Not in anger, she understands suddenly, but in restraint, the particular restraint of a man counting something to keep himself from feeling it, and she watches his lips move, almost imperceptibly, mouthing numbers she cannot hear. 1, 2, 3, 4, the way a man might count breaths to keep from drowning. How many? He says finally, and his voice has lost the low amused arithmetic of the granary. It has gone rough. How many children are down here? 11. Tonight, Senna says. More some weeks. Fewer, when. She stops herself. She has never finished that sentence for anyone, not even for herself. When, he says. When the winter takes them, she says, and watches it land on him, like a blow he should have seen coming and didn't. He turns away from her. Just for a moment, just long enough that she almost doesn't see it, the way his shoulders drop, and his breath leaves him in a long, unsteady stream. The way a man's composure cracks when he has spent 15 years building a wall, and someone has just shown him, without meaning to, exactly where the foundation was always rotten. Willa, watching all of this with the unblinking attention of a child who has learned to read rooms the way other children read books, says, in the smallest voice Senna has ever heard from her, "Are you going to hang her?" The question hangs in the cold air. Senna's whole body goes rigid, every instinct she owns screaming at her to step between the king and the child, to offer herself up first, to be the thing he punishes so the punishment goes no further. But before she can move, the king crosses the room in 3 long strides and crouches down, lowering himself to the child's eye level, his great frame folding down small in a way Senna has never once seen a powerful man choose to do. Not for anyone, and certainly not for an undercity orphan with nothing to offer him. "No," he says, and his voice directed at the girl has gone gentle in a way Senna did not know it could. "No, little one, I'm not going to hang anyone tonight." Willa studies him for a long moment with the particular suspicion of a child who has been promised things before. "You're not lying," she says finally. It is not a question. It is the conclusion of an investigation. "How do you know?" he asks, and there is real curiosity in it, not the false interest adults perform for children to feel clever. "Because liars look at the floor," Willa says, "and you're looking right at me." Something breaks open in his face. Not a smile, not quite, but something adjacent to one, an expression Senna will spend weeks trying to understand. Weeks before she lets herself name it as the first time she ever watched a king look human. He stays a long while in that room. He does not speak much more. He watches the children settle back into uneasy sleep around the strange fact of him, and Senna watches him watch them. And somewhere in the watching, the noose she has been braced for since she was 8 years old loosens its grip on her throat just slightly, just enough, that she can breathe, though she does not yet trust the breath to last. When he finally rises, his knees pop audibly, a small, human, undignified sound that seems to embarrass him more than anything that has happened so far tonight, and he looks at Senna with an expression she cannot read. "Walk with me," he says. It is not a question either, but this time, for reasons she cannot name, it does not feel like an order. They walk the corridor back toward the stair in silence, the basket still on her arm, 6 loaves of bread between them, like evidence neither of them has decided what to do with. She braces, the whole way, for the sentence she has spent 4 years rehearsing herself for: the dungeon, the rope, the public reading of her crimes, before whatever crowd gathers for such things. She braces so hard her jaw aches with it. What he says instead, stopping at the foot of the servant's stair with his back to a wall that has not seen daylight in 400 years, is, "What's your name?" "Senna." "Senna," he repeats, as if testing the weight of it, the way she'd tested the weight of his title an hour before. "And you've been doing this 4 yearsers?" "Yes, alone." There's no one else who would. He is quiet at that. The torch in its bracket nearby throws gold light across half his face, leaving the other half in shadow, and she thinks, treacherously, unbidden, that there is something almost beautiful in the asymmetry of it. The scar through his left eyebrow, thin and old, the kind of mark a blade leaves when a fight goes badly, and a man survives anyway. She has no business noticing such things about a king who has not yet told her whether she lives past tonight. She notices it anyway. Her body, it seems, has opinions her mind has not consulted. "Go home," he says finally. "Take the bread. Feed them." She does not move. She has trained herself, across 4 years of theft and 4 years of waiting to be caught, never to trust a gift that arrives without a price attached. And she stands there with the basket on her arm, and her whole body coiled with the certainty that this is the trap closing, not opening. "What do you want?" she says. It comes out sharper than she means it to. It is the first sharp thing she has said to him all night, and she sees it land, sees something flicker across his face, surprise maybe, or something closer to respect. "Tonight," he says, "nothing. Go home, Senna. Feed your children." She goes. She does not understand. She walks the long way back to the warren, with her heart hammering against the basket she still cannot quite believe she is allowed to keep. And behind her, though she does not see it, the Alpha King stands alone at the foot of that stair for a long, long while, his hands curling and uncurling at his sides, counting something. Coins he does not have in his pocket, a habit 15 years a king has never managed to break, until the torch burns low and the cold finally drives him back up into the gold and plenty of the world above, a world he has never once, in all his years of ruling it, managed to feel was entirely his. She does not sleep that night. She lies awake on her narrow pallet, with the children breathing around her in their uneven orphan rhythms. And she turns the encounter over and over the way a woman turns a coin to see if it's counterfeit, looking for the seam where the trick is hidden. She does not find one. That frightens her more than the noose would have. In the morning, Willa climbs into her lap before the others wake, small and warm and smelling of the wool blanket she sleeps wrapped in, and says, with the directness only children manage, "He smelled like us." Senna blinks down at her. "What do you mean?" "The king. He smelled like hungry." Willa says this the way she might report the weather, flat, factual. A child's unflinching accounting of the world as she has learned to read it. Not now. But underneath, like it never washed all the way out, Senna does not know what to do with that observation. She tucks it away the way she tucks away everything that frightens her without being immediately dangerous, in the deep pocket of her mind reserved for things she will think about later, when she has the luxury of thinking about anything that is not the next meal, the next theft, the next held breath waiting to be caught. The week that follows is the strangest of her life. She does not steal. She tells herself this is caution, that whatever mercy the king extended in that cold corridor was a single night's indulgence, a king's whim. The kind of thing powerful men grant themselves and then forget. And so she waits, hoarding what bread remains, stretching it thinner than usual across 11 hungry mouths, certain that any day now the guards will come for her after all, that the mercy was only ever the long arm of the trap, drawing back before the strike. The guards do not come. What comes instead, on the 4th day, is a basket left outside the Warrens' upper door. Not her basket, a different one, larger, unmarked, filled not with 6 loaves but with 20, and cheese besides, and a small sack of dried apples that have not gone soft with age the way the ones in her false bottom always had. There is no note, there is no name. Senna stands over it for a long time before she dares to touch it, certain it is some test she does not yet understand the rules of. She brings it inside. The children eat until they are full for the first time in longer than Senna can remember. And that night, lying awake again, she does not think about the noose at all. She thinks about gold-flecked amber eyes going still in a doorway, about a king's knees popping when he rose from a crouch he had no reason to make for children who could do nothing for him, about the word he used. Hours, almost, though he never said it, in the way he'd looked at that room like it belonged to some part of him he kept locked away from the rest of his life. She does not yet let herself call it kindness. She does not yet trust the word enough to use it on him. But the basket comes again the following week, and the week after. She does not see him again for nearly a month. When she does, it is not in the granary, and it is not at midnight. It is in the market square at midday, in the full, unforgiving light of the sun, where every soul in the city can see exactly who stops to speak with whom. And Senna, balancing a child on her hip, and a sack of turnips against her ribs, very nearly drops both when she looks up and finds the Alpha King standing directly in her path, dressed plainly, no crown, no guard in sight, as though he has gone to some trouble to make himself look like an ordinary man, and failing entirely, because there is nothing ordinary about the way the whole square seems to bend slightly toward him without anyone quite deciding to look. "You've stopped stealing," he says, by way of greeting, as if 4 weeks have not passed since their last conversation, as if this is simply the next sentence in an ongoing dialogue rather than the start of a new one. "I noticed the bread," she says carefully. "I didn't ask for it. I didn't ask if you'd asked. Then why mention it?" Something that might be amusement crosses his face, the same ghost of a smile from the granary, more solid now, less startled by its own existence. "Because I wanted to see what you'd say. And what did I say?" "Exactly what I expected," he says. And there is something warm beneath the words that she does not know what to do with. Something that makes the child on her hip squirm against the sudden tension in her arms, sensing without understanding it the way children always sense the things adults try to hide. He does not stay long. He never does, that first month. These are stolen minutes, snatched in market squares and at the mouths of alleys, conversations that begin and end abruptly. Because a king cannot be seen lingering too long with an undercity woman without setting the whole court's tongues wagging. And Senna, raised to expect punishment for visibility of any kind, finds herself almost grateful for the brevity even as some traitorous part of her wishes the conversations would last longer. She does not call it anything. She refuses, even in the privacy of her own mind, to give it a name. But Willa, watching from the Warrens' doorway one evening, as Senna returns, flushed and distracted from another of these accidental meetings, says only, with the terrible clarity of a child who has decided something and will not be talked out of it. You smell different when you come back from seeing him. I don't see him, Senna says. We happen to be in the same place sometimes. That's not what I asked, Willa says, and goes back to her sewing, leaving Senna standing in the doorway with her pulse doing something it has no business doing, something her body has decided on its own, the way it decided, 4 weeks ago, to notice a scar through an eyebrow she had no right to be noticing at all. It is at the second month's turning, with the harvest moon high and fat over the city, that everything she has built her caution around finally cracks open. She is not stealing that night. There is no need to. Not since the basket started arriving, but she has gone up to the granary regardless, drawn there by some restlessness she does not examine too closely, telling herself she only wants to see the place where this strangeness began, to stand in the dust and dark and understand, if she can, what changed. He is already there. He is not expecting her. She can tell by the way he startles, just slightly, when she rounds the corner into the same storeroom, where his hand once closed around her wrist, and for a moment neither of them speaks, both caught in the strange symmetry of returning, by separate accident, to the same dark room. He is crouched on the floor. There are coins scattered in front of him, small copper things of no great value, the kind a kitchen steward might use to settle accounts, and he is arranging them into stacks, counting under his breath, his lips moving the way they moved that first night in the Warrens' doorway. "What are you doing?" she asks, before she can stop herself. He looks up, and something in his face, caught, exposed, a king found doing something he never intended anyone to see, makes her wish, immediately, that she had stayed silent. "Counting," he says, and there is an edge of something raw beneath the word, something she has not heard from him before. Why? For a long moment she thinks he will not answer. He looks down at the coins instead of at her, sweeping them slowly back into a small pouch, his movements precise, practiced, the movements of a habit worn smooth by years of repetition. "My mother used to count," he says finally, "every coin we had." Out loud. Every night before she slept, because if she didn't count them, she couldn't be sure none had gone missing. And if one had gone missing, that was the difference between bread and no bread the next week. He ties the pouch closed. His hands, she notices, are not entirely steady. "I haven't needed to count anything in 15 years. I do it anyway, every night. I can't stop." Senna does not move. She has the sudden, dizzying sense of standing at the edge of something she was never meant to see. Not a king's power, which she has glimpsed in glances and rumors her whole life, but a king's wound, laid open in a dark room because he forgot, for one unguarded moment, that he was not alone. "You grew up hungry," she says. "It is not a question. I grew up in the Undercity," he says. "Different Warren than yours. Same hunger." He looks up at her finally, and the amber in his eyes has gone soft in a way she has not seen before, undefended, the wolf beneath his skin closer to the surface than she has ever felt it. "My mother died the winter I was 12. I clawed my way up through the pack hierarchy the only way an Undercity boy could. Fighting, mostly, and being willing to fight longer than anyone thought I'd survive. By the time I was old enough to wear a crown, I'd convinced myself the hunger was behind me, that I'd left it down in the dark where it belonged. But you didn't," she says. "No." His voice drops, rough at the edges. "I send bread down every week, have for years, quietly. Never enough. Never enough, Senna. Because every time I increase the allotment, some steward finds a way to skim it back, and I cannot watch every grain in this kingdom with my own 2 eyes. And so children starve 40 feet beneath the floor I sleep on, and I count coins at midnight because counting is the only thing that ever made me feel like I had control over anything." He stops himself. He looks, suddenly, like a man who has said far more than he intended, and braces. She recognizes the bracing, has done it herself 1,000 times. For whatever cost that honesty might bring him, she crosses the room before she has decided to. She kneels down across from him, the scattered cones between them, close enough now to smell him. And what she smells, beneath the cedar and leather a king is meant to smell of, is something else entirely. Something warm and slightly sweet and unmistakably his, a scent her body recognizes before her mind has caught up to the recognition, the way Willa's small nose recognized hungry beneath his composure a month before. "I'm not your enemy," she says, very quietly, because it is suddenly the only thing that matters to say. "I never have been." "I know," he says, just as quietly. "I think I've known since the granary. You're the only person above ground who's looked at that warren and refused to look away. I thought I was the only one left who remembered how to do that." Neither of them moves for a long moment. The torch burns low. Somewhere above them, the castle goes on being a castle, oblivious to the two people kneeling in its foundations who have just, without either one intending it, recognized something in each other that neither of them has words for yet. "The Sluna seat has been empty 15 years, he says abruptly, as though the words have been waiting behind his teeth for longer than tonight. "Every highborn family in the kingdom has paraded a daughter past me. I have refused every one of them." "Why?" she asks, though some part of her, the part that has been holding its breath since his hand closed around her wrist, already suspects the shape of the answer and is terrified of it. "Because none of them ever once asked me what it costs to feed a kingdom," he says, "and you have never asked me anything else." The bread basket between them has long since been forgotten. The coins lie scattered and uncounted on the stone floor. And Senna, 24 years old, raised on hunger and caution, and the absolute certainty that mercy always arrives with a hidden price, looks at the king of the realm, kneeling in the dust before her, and understands, with a lurch that goes straight through her chest, that she has spent the last month falling toward something. She has no idea how to survive. "I have to go," she says, too fast, scrambling back from the closeness of him before her body can betray her further. "The children—" "Senna." She stops at the door. She does not turn around. "I'm not asking you to be anything you're not," he says behind her, low. "I'm only telling you that I see what you are. And it isn't a thief." She does not answer. She cannot. She walks the long corridors back to the warren with her pulse hammering, and her skin still carrying the ghost warmth of having knelt close enough to smell him. And she does not sleep that night either, though for entirely different reasons than the sleeplessness of 4 years' theft. Word travels through a court faster than fever through a nursery. It does not take long, 3 days, perhaps 4, before the whispers reach every gilded corridor above ground. The king has been seen with an undercity woman, repeatedly. A thief, some cease, though none of them know the truth of what she stole or why, only that the word thief carries enough weight on its own to do their work for them. Senna feels the change before she fully understands its shape. The market stalls go quieter when she passes. A woman who has sold her vegetables for 3 years, without comment, suddenly cannot meet her eye. Beck, the night guard who has looked away from her theft for 4 years and never once asked for anything in return, finds her in the alley behind the warren one evening and says, awkwardly, his hands twisting at his belt, "You should be careful, Senna. They're talking. Let them talk," she says, though something in her chest has already gone cold and tight at the confirmation. "It's not just talk," Beck says. "Lord Cassian's been to see the king twice this week." "About you, Lord Cassian." The name lands in her like a stone dropped into still water. She has heard it before. Everyone in the city has heard it. The second most powerful man in the kingdom, the head of the Council of Lords, a man whose daughter was, by every account, the leading candidate to be named Luna before the king's long refusal made fools of every highborn family that tried. "What does he want?" she asks, though she already suspects. "He wants you gone," Beck says, before the king does something the council can't undo. She does not sleep that night either. The king sends for her 3 days later, the first time he has summoned her formally. by messenger, rather than finding her by accident in a market square or a dark granary. She goes dressed in the only clean dress she owns, her hands shaking the whole walk up through the castle's bright, gilded corridors, every footstep echoing too loud against marble that has never once, in 400 years, had to bear the weight of someone like her. He receives her in a small antechamber, not the throne room, and she is grateful for the smallness of it even as she registers, with a lurch, that he looks tired in a way she has not seen on him before, the particular exhaustion of a man who has spent days fighting a battle she cannot see the shape of. "They want me to send you away," he says, without preamble, the moment the door closes behind her. "Cassian's brought the full council. They say a known thief in my company is an insult to the throne. They say if I will not choose a Luna from among the houses, I should at least not be seen consorting with." He stops. His jaw tightens. His word, not mine. "What did you tell them?" she asks, though her voice has gone very small. "I told them I would consider their counsel." He says, "And then I came and found you, because I find I have very little interest in their counsel and a great deal of interest in what you think. I think," she says carefully, "that you should listen to them. I think this, whatever this is, was always going to end the moment it left the dark. Is that what you want?" The question lands harder than she expects. She looks at him, really looks, the scar through his eyebrow, the gold-flecked eyes that have gone soft and uncertain in a way she has only ever seen them go for Willa, and, now, terrifyingly for her, and she understands, with the particular clarity that comes only in moments of genuine crisis, that she does not want to leave. That she has not wanted to leave since the night his hand closed around her wrist and some buried part of her, starved far longer than her stomach has ever been starved, recognized in him the first person who had ever looked at her and seen something worth keeping. "No," she admits, "it isn't what I want." "Then stay," he says, "and let me fight for you, and we will see which of us the council underestimates more." The council does not yield easily. Cassian, when he finally confronts her directly, cornering her in a castle corridor with two of his men flanking him, his face arranged into the particular condescension of a man who has never once doubted his own right to judge, does not bother with subtlety. "You stole from the royal stores," he says, as if she might have forgotten, for years. "The penalty for that crime is the rope. Thief, regardless of whose bed you've managed to crawl into since." The word lands like a slap. She does not flinch. 4 years of bracing for cruelty have at least given her that, but something in her chest goes very still and very cold, and when she answers, her voice carries a steadiness that surprises even her. "I stole bread," she says, "because 11 children were starving 40 feet beneath your dining hall, my lord, while you ate well enough to grow soft in the belly. If that's a crime worth hanging for, I'll wear the rope proudly. But I'd ask you this first. In 15 years of sitting on the council, how many of those children did you feed?" Cassian's face goes a mottled red. His men shift, uncertain, unused to seeing their lord answered rather than obeyed. "You dare." "I dare nothing," Senna says. "I only ask." "You may answer or not, my lord, as you please." He does not answer. He sweeps past her instead, his men trailing, and Senna stands alone in the corridor, with her heart hammering and the dawning, dizzying realization that she has just spoken to one of the most powerful men in the kingdom, as though he owed her something, and meant every word of it. She tells Osric about the encounter that evening, expecting reproach for provoking the council further. What she gets instead is a low laugh, surprised out of him, the first true laugh she has heard from him, and an expression on his face that she will later understand was the precise moment he stopped merely caring for her and started, irrevocably, falling. "He's never been spoken to like that in his life," Osric says, shaking his head, something like delight breaking through the exhaustion. "Gods help me, Senna. I think I might actually want to see what you do to my whole council." "You might not survive the spectacle," she says. I might not, he agrees, but I find I don't much mind the risk. The council convenes formally a week later, a full hearing, the kind reserved for matters of succession and treason, called specifically, Senna understands with a sinking dread, to settle the matter of her once and for all. She stands at the back of the great hall in the dress they have given her, plain, undyed, deliberately humble, a costume chosen by Cassian's faction to remind the room exactly what she is, and watches 30 of the kingdom's most powerful lords and ladies debate her worth as though she were a parcel of land, rather than a woman with a pulse and a memory of every cruelty that has ever been done to people who look like her. A thief, Cassian says, pacing before the throne, his voice pitched to carry, cannot be Luna. It is not merely tradition, Your Majesty. It is the foundation of every law this kingdom stands upon. If theft from the royal stores carries no penalty for a woman who has caught the king's eye, what penalty does it carry for anyone? You would unmake the law itself to satisfy a passing fancy. It is not a passing fancy. Osric says, from the throne, his voice carrying the particular cold control of a man holding his temper by main force. Then it is worse, Cassian says, because it is permanent, and permanence compounds the insult. Murmurs ripple through the gathered lords. Senna feels the weight of 30 pairs of eyes shifting toward her, assessing, judging, finding her wanting before she has spoken a single word in her own defense, and she understands, with a clarity that nearly buckles her knees, that this is the moment, that whatever happens next will determine not just her fate, but the shape of every year that follows it. For her, for Osric, for 11 children sleeping in a cold warren 40 feet below this very hall, who have no idea that their fates are being argued over in gilded rooms they will never be permitted to enter. She could leave. The thought arrives, unbidden, with the particular seduction of an old habit calling her home. She could walk out of this hall, back down into the dark where she has always known the rules, where being no one has at least kept her safe, where the king's mercy was a strange and frightening gift she was never meant to keep. No one would stop her. Some part of the council, she suspects, is praying for exactly that, for the thief to flee, and spare them the discomfort of having to publicly reckon with what she represents. She thinks of Willa, watching her go that morning, with the particular gravity of a child who has learned not to expect people to stay. She thinks of the basket with its false bottom, built with a stolen knife, and 4 years of patience, the only thing she has ever made entirely her own. She thinks of a king kneeling on a cold stone floor, counting coins he does not need to count, confessing a hunger he has spent 15 years trying to bury. "May I speak?" she says. The hall goes quiet. Cassian's mouth thins, but even he cannot deny her the right. Not with the king watching, not with 30 witnesses present to see exactly how the request is handled. Osric inclines his head. "Speak." Senna steps forward. Her hands, she notices distantly, are not shaking. 4 years of bracing for the worst have given her, if nothing else, the strange gift of steadiness in exactly the moments when steadiness matters most. "I am a thief," she says, and lets the words sit in the hall, refusing to soften it, refusing to apologize for a truth that has cost her nothing to admit and everything to live with. "I have stolen from the royal granary every week for 4 years. I have lied to guards, hidden contraband in a basket built for the purpose, and broken the law of this kingdom more times than I can count. And I will tell you, my lords, exactly why, because I think none of you have ever once asked." She tells them about the warren. She tells them about 11 children, and the winters that take some of them, and the particular arithmetic of hunger that no high-born lord in this hall has ever had to learn. How many days a loaf of bread can be stretched, how small a portion a child's stomach can be trained to accept without complaint, how the body learns, eventually, to stop asking for what it knows it will not receive. She does not soften any of it. She does not perform grief for them, because grief has never once been useful to her. only the particular discipline of going on regardless. When she finishes, the hall is silent in a different way than before. Not the silence of judgment, but the silence of people confronted, for the first time in their gilded lives, with an arithmetic they have spent their whole existence being permitted not to learn. Cassian, predictably, recovers first. "A moving tale," he says, though his voice has lost some of its earlier certainty, but it changes nothing. "The law is the law regardless of motive." "Then change the law," Senna says. The hall goes very still. "You are the council," she says, turning to address the room rather than Cassian alone. "You write the laws this kingdom lives by. If the law as it stands says a starving child's life is worth less than a loaf of bread in a granary so full the surplus rots before it's ever eaten, and I have seen it rot, my lords. I have seen good grain turned to mold in storerooms while children 40 feet below starved for want of it. Then perhaps the law, and not the woman who broke it, is the thing that ought to be ashamed." No one speaks. Even Cassian, for one long moment, seems to have run out of words. It is Osric who breaks the silence, rising from the throne with a slowness that draws every eye in the hall. "I was an undercity orphan," he says, and the admission lands like a thunderclap, because in 15 years of rule, he has never once spoken the words aloud in this hall, has spent his entire reign burying the hunger of his childhood beneath crowns and councils, and the particular performance of a king who has always belonged exactly where he stands. "I clawed my way to this throne with nothing but my hands and a willingness to fight longer than men twice my size. I have spent every year since sending what aid I could down into the dark, and every year men in this very hall have found ways to skim it back before it reached the mouths it was meant for." He looks for the first time directly at Cassian. "I wonder, my lord, how much of the grain that rots in our granaries does so because someone profits from its rotting rather than its sharing." Cassian's face has gone the color of old ash. "Your Majesty, I would never." "I did not name you," Osric says, "though I notice you've named yourself." He lets that sit. Then, quieter but no less commanding, "This woman did not steal from greed. She stole because 11 children would have died otherwise. And she chose, every single week for 4 years, to risk her own neck rather than let that happen. I have met high-born lords who would not risk a single coin for a stranger's comfort. I have never, in 15 years of rule, met anyone, not one soul in this entire kingdom, who has shown me more clearly what it means to actually care for the people beneath them than the thief you would have me hang." He descends the steps from the throne. The whole hall watches him cross the floor, every lord and lady present holding their breath, and when he reaches Senna, he does not stop at a respectful distance the way protocol would demand. He takes her hand. He once closed his fingers around in a dark granary, expecting to find a criminal and finding instead the only honest person left in his entire kingdom, and turns to face the assembled council with her standing beside him. "I name Senna of the Undercity Warren as my Luna," he says, "not despite what she has done, but because of it. The measure of a crown, my lords, has never been what it keeps for itself. It is what it chooses to feed." The hall erupts, not entirely in approval. Cassian's faction still sputtering protests that will, Senna understands, take weeks if not months to fully quiet. But beneath the protest, she catches something else moving through the room, a current of something that might, given time, become respect, or at least the grudging acknowledgement of lords who have just watched their king do something none of them expected, and most of them, if they are honest with themselves, secretly admire. Senna stands at the center of it all, her hand in the king's, and feels, for the first time in 4 years of bracing for the worst, something other than fear settle into her chest. It feels, she thinks, almost exactly like breathing. The days that follow are not simple. Cassian does not surrender so easily as the hall's noise might suggest. There are weeks of quieter battles, whispered objections, a faction of high-born families who continue, in private, to question whether a king's heart is sufficient justification for unmaking centuries of tradition. Senna learns, in those weeks, that being seen does not mean being safe, that a crown does not erase the particular ache of walking through halls where half the eyes that follow her still carry suspicion rather than welcome. But Osric does not waver. He stands beside her through every council session, every cold dinner where highborn ladies pointedly do not address her, every moment where the old order tries, in its slow grinding way, to remind her that she has not yet fully earned the place she has been given. And there are gentler moments, too. Moments she will carry longer than any of the battles. The evening he finds her in the warren, 3 weeks after the hearing, sitting cross-legged on the floor, while Willa plaits a crown of dried grasses into her hair, with the deep concentration of a child performing a sacred rite, and he does not interrupt, does not announce himself the way protocol would demand. He simply lowers himself to the floor beside them, folding his great frame down small the way he did that very first night, and lets Willa, without asking permission, plait a second crown of grass into his hair as well. "There," Willa announces, surveying her work with evident satisfaction. "Now you match." "Do we?" Osric says, and there is something so unguarded in his voice, something so far from the cold arithmetic of crowns and councils that Senna's chest aches with the tenderness of it. "You smell like you belong here now," Willa says, with the particular bluntness only children manage, and goes back to her plaiting as though she has not just spoken the truest thing said in that room in weeks. Senna watches the king of the realm sit on a cold stone floor wearing a crown of dried grass, laughing, actually laughing, low and real, nothing performed in it at all, and thinks that whatever battles remain above, whatever cold dinners and suspicious glances the highborn houses still have in store for her, she would face every one of them again for the privilege of watching this. It is Senna, in the end, who fights the smallest and most important battle of all. Not for herself, but for Beck. Word reaches her, 3 weeks after the hearing, that the night guard who looked away from her theft for 4 years has been arrested. Cassian's faction, unable to touch the king's chosen Luna directly, has turned its remaining venom toward the smallest available target, the guard whose negligence, they argue, made her years of theft possible in the first place. He faces dismissal at best, imprisonment at worst, and Senna learns of it only an hour before the matter is to be decided. She goes to Osric directly, finding him mid-council, with 3 lords still arguing logistics of the spring planting, and does not wait for an invitation to speak. "Beck looked away," she says, the moment the room quiets enough to hear her, "because he had a sister with children of her own who would have starved without what I brought them. He did not take a coin for his silence. He gave me 4 years of mercy at the risk of his own position, and I will not stand by and watch him punished for the same kindness that put a crown on my head." Osric studies her for a long moment. The lords around the table shift uncomfortably, unused to seeing a Luna interrupt council business, unused, still, to the particular force of her conviction. "You're asking me to pardon a guard who knowingly allowed theft from the royal stores," Osric says, though there is no real challenge in it. She has learned, in these weeks, to hear the difference between his testing voice and his teasing one, and this is neither. "I'm asking you to remember what you said in that hall 3 weeks ago," Senna says. "The measure of a crown is what it chooses to feed. Beck fed mercy when mercy cost him something real. I'd think a king who built his entire reign on exactly that principle might recognize it when he sees it in someone else." The room is silent. Then Osric, slowly, allows the smile he has been suppressing to surface fully. "Release the guard," he says to the lords present, "with my thanks for his service and a raise in pay besides, for showing more wisdom in his silence than half this council has shown in its noise." Beck weeps when Senna brings him the news herself, standing in the same alley where he once warned her to be careful. He does not have words for his gratitude. He does not need any. Senna understands, watching him, that this small, unglamorous mercy, granted not to a queen or a lord but to a tired night guard who once chose kindness over duty, is exactly the kind of victory that will never be sung about in any hall, and exactly the kind that matters most. The coronation, when it finally comes, is held not in the great hall where the lords once argued over her worth, but in the wide courtyard before the castle, where for the first time in the kingdom's long history, the Undercity is invited to stand alongside the highborn to witness their Luna crowned. Senna stands at the top of the stone steps in a gown the color of harvest wheat, simple by royal standards, chosen because it reminded her, when the seamstresses showed her the bolt of cloth, of the bread she carried for 4 years in a false-bottomed basket built with a stolen knife. Osric stands beside her, his crown catching the morning light, and below them both, arrayed across the courtyard in their cleanest clothes, scrubbed faces bright with an excitement none of them have ever before been permitted to feel, in the presence of royalty, stand the 11 children of the Warren, Willa at their center, chin lifted, eyes fierce and proud. Dressed in a small crown of dried grass she insisted on wearing, despite every lady-in-waiting's gentle attempt to substitute something finer. They asked me. Senna had told Osric the night before what the children should wear, and what did you tell them? I told them to let her wear the grass crown, Senna said. Because some things shouldn't be improved on just because they can be. Now, watching Willa stand proud and unbowed before a courtyard full of lords who once would have had her swept from view as an embarrassment, Senna understands exactly why she insisted. Cassian stands among the assembled council, his face arranged into something that is not quite welcome but is, at least, no longer outright hostility, the slow, grudging surrender of a man who has watched enough weeks pass without disaster to begin, reluctantly, recalculating his certainties. He does not smile, but he does not object either, and Senna, who has learned in these strange months to measure victory in inches rather than miles, counts that as enough. The High Priestess speaks the old words of binding, words that have crowned every Luna in 400 years of this kingdom's history, though never, until today, a woman who once climbed through a granary window in the dark with a stolen knife in her boot. Senna listens to them with her hand in Osric's, feeling the warmth of him beside her, the particular scent of him that her body recognized as home, before her mind ever caught up to the recognition. And when the priestess finally pronounces the binding complete, the courtyard erupts. Not the careful, measured applause of court tradition, but something rawer, louder, the Undercity's voices rising unrestrained, alongside the highborns. A sound this courtyard has never once in 400 years been asked to hold. Osric turns to her. His eyes have gone soft in the way she has come to recognize as entirely, helplessly hers. I told you, he says low, just for her, that I see what you are. Now they do too. What am I? She asks, though she thinks she already knows the answer, has known it since a cold corridor and a hand that did not tighten when it could have. Someone who never once looked away, he says, from the people everyone else taught themselves not to see. She does not weep, though she comes close. 4 years of bracing herself against the worst the world could offer have made her unpracticed at receiving its best. And the unfamiliarity of it, the strange, full ache of being seen, finally, exactly as she is, sits heavy and warm in her chest, heavier and warmer than any crown. Below them, Willa lifts her small chin higher, grass crown crooked, eyes shining, and shouts, with the particular fearlessness of a child who has just watched the world prove, for once, that mercy might be real after all. Long live the Luna! The cry catches. It spreads through the courtyard, Undercity and highborn voices tangling together for the first time in living memory, and Senna, standing at the top of those stone steps with her king's hand in hers, and 11 orphan children, shouting her name into the bright morning air, understands at last that the noose she spent 4 years bracing for has been replaced, finally, by something she never let herself imagine she might be permitted to keep. That evening, after the feasting has quieted and the long day's ceremony has finally released its grip on both of them, Senna finds Osric alone on the high balcony overlooking the city. The same city whose granaries she once robbed in the dark, now spread out beneath them in lamplight. The undercity's glow no longer entirely separate from the castle's. The lines between plenty and want, for one night at least, blurred soft by distance and dark. He is not counting coins tonight. His hands, when she takes them, are still. "I never told you," he says, "what I did after that first night I followed you down. Tell me now." "I doubled the granary's spoilage allotment," he says, quietly. "Routed through 3 different stewards so no one could trace it back to a single order. I never told you, because I didn't want you to feel you owed me anything for it, and because some part of me wanted to see, before I told you anything at all, whether you'd come to trust kindness on its own, without a king's name attached to explain it." Senna stares at him. The bread that arrived weekly, unmarked, unexplained, the bread she spent a month suspecting was a trap closing rather than a hand opening. It had not been some passing whim, some impulse he might have abandoned. It had been deliberate, patient, quiet, the way real care so often is, asking nothing in return, expecting nothing in recognition, content simply to exist in the dark and do its work without ever once needing to be seen. "You should have told me," she says, though her voice has gone thick. "Would you have believed me that first month?" he asks. "Or would you have spent every night since waiting to discover what it would cost you?" She has no answer for that, because she knows, with the particular clarity hindsight always grants, that he is right. That a month ago, she would have turned even his kindness into evidence of a trap, would have braced against it the same way she braced against everything, certain that nothing good arrives, without a blade hidden somewhere in its palm. "I'm not waiting for the cost anymore," she says instead, and means it fully for the first time in her life. He pulls her close. Below them, the city's 2 halves glow together in the dark, undercity and castle both lit by the same moon, and somewhere down in the warren, 11 children who once knew her only as the woman who fed them in secret now fall asleep knowing that the woman who loved them has become the Luna of the whole kingdom, and that the bread, from now on, will never again need to come hidden beneath a false bottom in a basket built by a thief's careful, desperate hands. The basket, in fact, still sits in the corner of Senna's old room in the warren, kept rather than discarded, because some things— she has learned this slowly, painfully, across 4 years of hunger and 1 impossible spring of being finally, fully seen— are not meant to be hidden away once their purpose has been fulfilled. They are meant to be kept, in plain sight, as proof of exactly how far a person can travel from where they began, and exactly what it costs, and exactly what it can, against every reasonable expectation, eventually become. I think that's the truest thing this story has to offer you, before I let you go tonight, that the measure of anyone, crowned or not, has never been what they kept for themselves, but who they chose to feed when no one else was watching. Senna fed 11 children with stolen bread because she could not do otherwise, and a king who never forgot his own hunger built a whole kingdom's mercy on the same quiet, stubborn instinct. That's the kind of love this story believes in. Not the kind that arrives with fanfare, but the kind that shows up, again and again, in the dark, asking nothing, until one day it's simply impossible to imagine the world without it. Thank you for staying with me through this one. If it found its way into your chest the way I hoped it might, I'd love for you to stay a little longer. There are more stories like this one waiting. More thieves and kings and quiet, stubborn mercies. More nights where someone finally gets seen exactly as they are. Until the next story finds you, sleep warm, and remember, the bread always matters more than the rope.